Okay, I gave a little quiz at the beginning of the hour here, 5 questions you should be able to do by this point. This is a day where we're going to do some MCA review later in the day, but for right now, number 1. That one's on your sheet. You should know that one, and it is a cofunction one. So what's the cofunction for sine? Cosine. So you should have cosine on top. And if you have cosine right here, cosine over sine is one you should know. What's cosine over sine? Cotangent. Do you get how cosine over sine is cotangent? That's a good question. Take off half of a point. That would be marked wrong, so let's nick them a little bit so they know what to do next time. Okay, number 2. Do you get that this is on your sheet? It's there. What is that exactly equal to on the sheet? Not negative, regular cosine of x. So plain cosine of x. That's the one on the sheet. That's the only one that when you do cosine of negative x, it's regular cosine of x. So if that turns into regular cosine of x, cosine over sine, what's that? Cotangent. And cotangent times tangent makes 1. All right. Number 3. On number 3, you should have factored out this sign that's in both of them. That is a little difficult to see, but there is a sign buried in both of them. So you'd have this sign, which I already have, and then another sign with it in the front. So that's going to make sine theta times another sine theta. So sine squared theta times what's left. When I take this out and this out, I have cosine theta minus, what do I put for that? 1. Cosine theta minus 1. All over, on the bottom, do you see I have a cosine theta minus 1? That's exactly why we did that. So we have cosine theta times cosine theta minus 1. Now these are exactly identical, so they can cancel. And the answer is sine squared over cosine. Yes, you can leave it that way. If you wanted to make it something different, you could. You could break up the sine squared theta into sine theta times another sine theta, and you could call it all over cosine theta. And then you could, if you really wanted to, make that into a tangent. So tangent times sine is another appropriate answer. So this one was either sine squared over cosine or tangent times sine. One last thing I would have accepted is you could have made this into 1 minus cosine squared. 1 minus cosine squared all over cosine would have been another okay answer. Okay, that one was not something I'm proud of. Number 3, I should have made that a little simpler. I should have made it come out to just a plain sign, so I wish I would have never put that sign in the problem in the first place. And then I wouldn't have had sine squared. I would have been left with instead just sine over cosine, and then the answer would have just been tangent. That would have been more like what you would normally have, is you'd have something simple like you're left with sine over cosine, and you got to know that that one's tangent. That's what I really wanted to do in number 3. But I did it wrong in first hour, and I probably should have just fixed it. Anyway, let's move on to number 4. On number 4, I'm going to move all this stuff down for number 5. Just a second here. There we go. Grab those last pieces by accident. That up there. Okay. So what I do in this one is notice that, no, there's a cosine in both of them. You have to notice that. That factors out. Cosine theta times sine theta minus, and if I take one out of each of these, what does that turn into? A 1. And then that's all set up. It says equals 0. So now I can say this equals 0. Cosine theta equals 0. That's going to give me 2 answers. And then this equals 0. Sine theta minus 1 has to equal 0. I'm going to solve that. Sine theta equals 1. So if you don't know your cosine is x and your sine is y thing, you wouldn't have got these. But if you remember that cosine is x, then x is 0. And where is x 0? Here and here are 2 spots that cosine is 0, or x is 0. So those are my 2 answers, pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. They get half for the question. 0 is not one of the right answers. Well, just hold on. I'm not done with the problem yet. So far, the answers are pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Now, here's the rest of the answer. Over here, sine theta is equal to 1. So where is y, because that's what sine is, where is y equal to 1? Only one spot, right there. And that's what? Pi over 2. There's one answer that's the same as this answer. Do you have to write them twice? No. If you've already got it written there, you don't have to write down pi over 2 again. Okay, so since this is a repeat, I don't really need to have it there. 0 is not right. Then take off half a point because they got something right and something wrong. Number 5. This one, you should have noticed, is like this. It's something squared and something that's not squared and then a constant. Can you factor things like that? Yes, you can. So you should have been able to factor this guy. So you say, 2 sets of parentheses, sine, and what would I multiply sine by to do my first, first outside, inside, last? Sine. And then what would I multiply to get a 1? A 1 and a 1, and these are all pluses, a plus and a plus. And now that it's factored, you can take this part and set it equal to 0, and since this one's identical, I don't need to do it twice, right? So sine x plus 1 equals 0. Sine x equals negative 1. Where is sine, which is y, equal to negative 1? Down here. That's the only place where y is negative 1. 0 comma negative 1. And so that is my spot. That is my answer. And that needs to have a radians. Which is it? 3 pi over 2 down there. All right. Hand it back to the owner. Curious to see if anybody had a perfect. I'm doubting it, but. Okay. How many of you had a 5 out of 5? Raise your hand if you did. Kind of thought maybe. How about a 4 out of 5? Got a fair number of those. 1, 2, 3 of you. Nice job. How about a 3 or 3.5? Awesome. There's a bunch of those. Nice work. Okay. If you got worse than that, that implies you got some sort of a 2. That would imply you would have had an F on this little mini test. Just be aware, this is a reasonable, that wasn't super hard questions. That was normal at this point. So if you're averaging an F right now in understanding, you need to pick it up because you aren't going to get that much smarter over break unless you actually try something. Okay, I'll give you some stuff you can do over break if you want to get better at this stuff. But that's going to be up to you. I'm not going to assign a normal assignment over break. Not trig anyways. So, but you have a trig test coming up after break. Not like right away. We come back, we do a little more stuff, and then you have this test. It's not going to happen until April 17th, I believe. So you'll have a full week worth of trig first, and then we take the test. But I'm just trying to say, so far, you should get this. And if you know, oh, all I did was wrong was this, if it's a small thing, no big deal. If you just didn't know where to start, that's a totally different thing. That means you better dig in over break. Okay, so let's now talk about the MCA tests. They are coming up. The legislature has said that if you don't pass this test, that you can't graduate. But then they said, oh, wait a minute, that's really harsh. So if they don't pass it, then what we would want them to do is to take a year, or not necessarily a year, it can be shorter than that, some period of time and do what's called remediation, which is basically extra practice on those topics. And then, so the main penalty if you didn't pass the test would you have to take it again. And then if you failed it a second time, you had to take it again. And if you failed it a third time, then you could just stop taking it. So lots of big heavy-duty repercussions there. I guess I understand, though, because if they just made it so that kids that did not do well in math never graduated from high school, I don't think, some kids, honestly, it's not a motivation problem. They just seriously are really, really bad at math, really, really, really bad at math, such that, I mean, I'm talking tons, I'm talking maybe 1%. But if even 1% of kids were never allowed to graduate from high school, then they can never get into college, and then they can never, there's a lot of doors that are shut to them. So I understand. But Most of you guys can pass this test. And we're going to review for the test. And I'd like you to think of it more as a review for the MCA, for the ACT test, because all of these things are on the ACT. In particular, the stuff that we're doing today is geometry. And a lot of you kind of were like, I was terrible at geometry. I didn't like geometry. Well, you know what? The ACT is 40% geometry. Let's see. The ACT is 40% geometry. So what we're doing today is important on the ACT. And I know some of you are thinking, well, you know, I'm already in the college that I want to get into. I don't need to have a better ACT score. It can sometimes make a big difference on scholarships. Between my son and my daughter, the main difference was one of them had higher ACT, and my daughter had the higher ACT, and she got an extra $5,000 in scholarship offer from the same college. So both of them were offered scholarships from this college, $5,000 per year off the tuition. Times that by 4 years, that's $20,000 more in scholarships just for having a higher ACT. 2 points higher. So bottom line is, yeah, it can make a difference. And you might think, well, I'm already in. Well, at some point, unless mom and dad are writing the check for the whole thing, and if they are, don't you kind of owe them to try your hardest to make the price as low as possible? Or if they're not paying the whole thing and you're going to have to take out some loans, if you can get the price down $5,000, you'll have less loans. And that's more money in your pocket later. So I do encourage you to try your hardest on the ACT, get the highest score that you can. If you don't do as well as you want the first time, take it again. And the highest I've ever heard of is a guy who took it 18 times. And his 18th time, he got it up to a 32, which is still not amazing, but he started at an 18. He got an 18 on the ACT, which is pretty low, and he ended up with 32, which is pretty high. Took it 18 times. 36 is the max. I do know another story that's maybe a little more inspiring to some of you that are on the higher end of the scale. A person in Orono that my son knows, I got a 30, I think it was either a 30 or a 31 on it the first time. Took it 5 times, not just, they had to also had practice in between, lots of practice and doing practice tests and all that stuff, and he got up to the 36. He got the perfect 36, and he got into Stanford or Harvard, one of the big ones. And you never get in there with a 31, no way. So he needed that 36 to be able to get the ticket to the Ivy League. Can be done. You have to work hard at it. All right, so anyway, I'd like you to think of this as ACT practice because I think it'll be more motivating to you to think of it that way. So there's geometry and there's trig. They're the two main things. And I bet you there's 2 formulas I can teach you that are going to get you through a lot of this stuff. And I bet you a lot of you won't know. I'd like you to try this problem without any help from me. I'd like to just give you one practice problem and you take some scratch paper and see if you can solve it. Calculator is okay. You can use a calc on this. Can't look up formulas on the internet though. Just use your calculator if you want. If that's 8 and that's 12 and that's 3 and that is 4, I'd like you to tell me the area of this shape. If you have no clue what the formula is, you might as well quit now. Because I did not make it symmetrical, so you can't just like, try to figure it out with triangles because you don't even know where this triangle would go, for instance. All right, but there may be a way you could figure it out, but basically there's a really easy way to do this with a formula. And if you don't know the formula, I'll tell you in a second. Okay, so try it. And if you have no hope, just wait a second. Now, there's an important distinction here. On the ACT test, you would not be given a list of formulas. They expect you to know formulas for things like this. If it's really complicated, the ACT will give you a formula, like really complicated stuff, like stuff I don't even have memorized. Then they give you a formula for that and expect you to just plug things in. But things like this, if you don't know the formula, you don't get the point because there's no formula sheet on the ACT. But on the MCA test, the one the state gives you, there is a big formula sheet and this one is on it. How many of you knew what you're supposed to do? Raise your hand. All right, so there's like 4 of you, 5 of you that might have gotten this right. Now, after what I'm about to show you, if you can remember this, you got yourself a free easy point. Would you agree that if I did 12 times 3, that would give me the area of the red box? 12 times 3 would give you the area of the red box. Do you get that that's too big? Okay. On the other hand, if I did 8 times 3, that would give you the area of that box, right? Do you get that that would be too small? So instead of using the 8, which is too small, or the 12, which is too big, you average them. You average the 8 and the 12, as in add them together, divide by 2. And then times by the height. So final answer, averaging the 8 and the 12 gives you an average of 10. 10 times the 3 makes 30. Who had the right answer of 30? All right, so 6 or 7 of you. And there are different ways to do it. I just want to keep it simple. That this formula is a powerful, easy one to know, because sometimes the dividing it up into triangles and rectangles thing can be challenging and takes a long time. And if you just know to average these two and times by that one, to me that's easy. All right. Why is the 4 there? Just to see if you know whether or not to use it. So in this case, you didn't need it. All right. So now let's talk about another one that if you know the formula, the problems become piece of cake. Okay. Don't forget, write that formula down that I just gave you. Average basis times by height. You're going to need that on the worksheet I'm about to give you. All right. Then here's the other one. Let's say that you have a hexagon. Not a beautiful hexagon, but that's okay. Now, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. So from here, if I go to the middle of a side that's kind of like a radius, isn't it? But it's not a radius. Do you remember the geometry name for that thing? Starts with an A. Close. It's got an AP. It's called an apothem. Now, are they going to test you on the word apothem? No. But this formula that I'm about to show you, which is to find the area of this shape, yes, you could divide it up into a whole bunch of triangles and then try to do some complicated thing with those triangles to figure out their area and then times it by 6. So that would work. Dividing everything up into triangles works on many problems. But if you know this formula, 1/2 times the perimeter times the A, which what do you think that is? The apothem. The area will equal 1/2 PA. Would everybody please write that down? That's going to come in really handy on this worksheet I'm about to give you in a minute. All right, so I need to give you some numbers here. Let's say this is 8, and let's say each of these sides here is 6. Then, do you get that the perimeter on this guy would be 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6, or 6 times 6, which would be 36. 1/2 times 36 times apothem, which is what? 8. And I'd choose to multiply the 1/2 and the 8 together because that would make it a little easier. So then half of the 8 would be 4. So it's basically 36 times 4, which you'll have a calculator today, but 36 times 4. And 6 times 4 is 24, 3 times 4 is 12, 14, there we go. 144. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So the apothem would have to go to the side like that?
Yes. Cannot go to the corner to be an apothem. If it was going like this, obviously would be a different length, right? And the one that matters for this formula is the apothem. Any questions on that one? All right, so then when I change it to a 12-sided shape, and I will never be able to draw that well, so I'll just kind of go like this. Say it's a 12-sided shape, and let's say that the radius is, no, it's not a radius. What's that thing called again? An apothem is 10, and let's say that this side right here is 4, but it's a 10-sided shape, a decagon. Figure out the area for me. If it's a decagon, 10-sided shape, and its apothem is 10, what's the area of this puppy? What? Tell me what you used. Give me the formula first. All right. And 1/2 times, what was your perimeter that you used? So 40 for the perimeter, I agree. Times the apothem is 10. So you go 400, half of that is 200. Raise your hand if you would agree that 200 would seem right to you. That's correct. Okay, good. So that's how you do your area of your polygons. 1/2 the P, the perimeter, times the apothem. Now, can you do other areas? Yeah, you can divide them all up into triangles, and it does work. Okay, but this little formula also works for any polygon. That's pretty powerful. All right, so there's a couple things from geometry that could be handy for you. There's lots of things in geometry to know. I'm not going to go through all of them. I will go through one more that comes up a lot on the ACT test. What they'll do is draw a shape like this, which is a parallelogram, which means all the sides are parallel to each other, at least to the one across from them. And then if I said this was 100 degrees, you can figure out every angle in the whole thing. Do you get how that works? Because the ones that are across from them, like straight through like that, those are 100. And then what are the ones that are next to it? 80. So everything's either 100 or 80 on the whole sheet. But see, they don't make it that obvious on the ACT. They'll go like this, and then they won't show you like those sides, and they won't show you maybe even those sides, and maybe they won't even show you that side. And then you're supposed to figure out, realize for yourself that that's actually that same exact situation I just showed you. Just you have to extend the sides out. And then they might say, what is angle X? That's a really easy one. What is it? 100. What if they said instead that the area of, or excuse me, this is X, this is 2X. No, that wouldn't make any sense. Let's go the other way. Let's say that's X and that's 2X. And they don't tell us what this is. Now can you figure out how big X is? You can figure it out. Know why? Do you know what all the angles in a shape add up to? Close. That's a triangle. A quadrilateral like this adds up to 360. So it would be all of these added up make 360. So then, would you agree this has to be 2x, whatever 2x is? Would you agree this has to be x, whatever x is? And then do you get that you really have 2x plus 2x plus x plus x, which makes what? 6x has to equal what? 360. And then 6 times what makes 360? 60. So are my angles all 60s? No, but x is 60. So then that means that's 60, which means that would be what? 120. So 60 and 120 and 60 and 120. We're not doing trig. So you're thinking, yes, but we don't measure quadrilaterals with radians. So let's not confuse anybody listening at home. All right, so let's move on to one last topic in geometry that I think is valuable for the MCAs. You're asked to know a bunch of formulas, and I'm just going to fire off a few. Do you know the formula for a cylinder, like a pop can? There's two formulas, the volume and the surface area. Do you have them memorized? If you don't, you might want to write these down. They come up on this worksheet I'm going to give you today, too. The volume of this puppy is pi r squared is the circle, and then what? Times height. Good. The formula for the volume of anything is you just take the area of its base, which in this case is the circle, and then you times by its height. So pi r squared times the height. And then the surface area. This one, would you agree that the surface of a can like this has two circles involved in it? Therefore, it's got a 2 pi r squared in it. You get how there's two circles, and therefore 2 pi r squared? And then this other part, you just have to memorize 2 pi RH. That gives you the area of the rest of it. Yes, you could piece it together by unfolding this can and figuring out that if you unrolled it, it would look like this, and that this is actually the same as the circumference of the circle that you unfolded, you know. So this is like the circumference, which is also known as circumference is pi d, or pi times 2r. And then the other thing is the height. That's how you get the 2 pi RH. But anyway, I would just write this down because it would be handy to know. There's a couple more formulas. Last one's a box. You know the surface area of a box. Can you picture if you had a box like this and you needed to find the surface area of it? Do you agree it has 6 sides on a box? That's something you should know. And then, would you agree that one of the sides, that's actually a terrible box. I'm going to draw another one that's better. You make 2 squares like that and then just connect the corners, it works better. Okay, so now, if I wanted to find the volume of this, that's easy. You guys know that one? I'm going to say length, width, height. You could use any 3 variables. Okay, how about the surface area? It's 2 of length, width, plus 2 of come on, length height, plus 2 of width height. So if this is height, and this is length, and this is width, it's 2 of each combo. You see, like this side right here would be HL or LH, and there's 2 of them. And then this side here would be like WH, and there's 2 of those. And then the top would be like LW, which is like this, and there's 2 of those. The black ones were that. Okay. All right, there's a bunch of formulas you might want to know for the big geometry part of the test. Remember, ACT, 40% geometry. And the test that you are about to take soon on behalf of your school. Also, it does matter for schools. If your schools come out with really low scores on this, it looks like all the kids there are not very bright. And that means the kind of the value of your education goes down. When right now, Minnetonka being one of the top scoring schools in the state, when you say I went to Minnetonka, the adults in the room are like, oh, that's a good district. Okay, if we start getting bad scores, then you say, well, I'm going to Minnetonka. It's like, oh, that's not great. So if you're going to a school that's a good school, people think more highly of your education. And then if you're at a school that's barely kind of making it. And our school has overall done well. So even though many of you are going to pass, no matter what, if you just would try your best, it'll make your school look better, which in turn makes you look better. All right. So the people that have iPads, let me show you where these worksheets are. And today is just geometry, which we've gone over, so this should be easy peasy for you. Okay, I'll back this up so you can see a little more of where it is. It starts out in your homework and answers area. Specifically, you click on the blue folder that says homework and answers in Schoology. Once you're in that, you click through to find course worksheets. The next logical thing was you have solutions or worksheets. You choose the one that says worksheets. There is a whole separate folder for MCA review, and I can't make it show up on the screen here for some reason. There we go. Okay, MCA review is this folder in the lower left, right there. MCA review. Click on that one. Once you're in there, there are several choices. The 2 worksheets we are doing today, one says the word geo in it right there. See how it says MCA review geo? And the other one says trig, MCA review trig. The seniors that got it on paper, both of them say geometry on top actually, because trig is part of geometry. But anyway, so right here, MCA review geo, everybody open that one. If it says 112 degrees on the first problem, you've got the right page. Next, I recommend strongly that you use Notability and you just write right in your iPad. If it's annoying to you to write in your iPad, you could just take a piece of paper out and do them on the piece of paper. Or I do have a bunch of styluses here that I've gotten, and kids sometimes enjoy trying a stylus. I'm going to pause for a second while I hand out styli to you and see if you want to use one. Okay, I was supposed to record that. All right, so yes, there's more problems in there than I thought there were. You can just do the odds of the problems. And I am realistically not going to be collecting these until after break. This is the assignment for tomorrow, as in if you want to stay on track, get done with the odds and the 2 geometry/trig packets. But if you do not have the time for that, I am being honest that I will not be collecting it tomorrow, but I will be collecting them after break. Okay? You don't have your test on for the MCA test. The big test is not happening until after break, so it's totally fine if I don't have you finish. I will also talk to the other teachers on how much they're assigning, because that's insane. There's no way we're assigning you 2 packets that have 56 problems in them. That's insane. So do the odds for tonight, and the first few are going to be easy. Yes? It's all multiple choice on the MCAs. There are some changes that are coming but this is the last year of the MCA tests as they currently are written. So they wouldn't change it on the last year and then dump them. You know what I mean? So this is the same as it was last year and the year before. It's basically multiple choice tests. There are some that are called like gridded response. So in other words, the answer is like 26.8 and you have to grid in a 26.8. But that's the only different kind of problem besides multiple choice. The current sophomores, they are moving towards not having the MCA test like it is in 11th grade, and instead having end of course tests. So as in, like, everybody in the state of Minnesota that's taking precalc would take the state precalc test at the end of the year, or in spring, or whenever they give it. So I don't know. Bottom line is, we don't know. Nobody knows yet what the new system will be. All we know is that this is the last year of the old system. So time will tell. But I can tell you this, the last time they were not willing to put it in as like a, if you don't pass, you don't graduate. They kind of sort of did that, but then they always backed off. I really doubt they'll come up with anything really vicious for you. And, you know, because if in Minnetonka here we have, you know, 20 or 30% of our kids not pass something, that would mean in some district it'd be like 60% of the people not passing, and they're not going to want to fail everybody in Minnesota. So don't worry, they're not going to do anything like that to you. If you're a good math student, you'll be fine. Okay, so I've taught you enough that you should be able to get through the odds on both of these worksheets without much difficulty. I get you that there's a lot of problems. And just get through as many as you can tonight. I'll tell you more tomorrow. And that's all I have for you for today.